So I acknowledge their contribution. Now, the way I have organized this presentation is that initially I'm going to give a very brief glance at the power sector in Bangladesh. Many of you might already be aware of that, but please do bear with me. And then I'm going to quickly talk about the impact of COVID-19, the pandemic, on the power sector, and how that has really emphasized the fact that why we need to focus on renewable energy going forward. And if we want to build or develop a renewable energy sector, a renewable energy based power sector, what sort of lesson we need to take on from our previous encounters or previous experience with renewable energy projects and programs. And that's where we go back to the it called solar home systems and what sort of lessons that we see with that project success, and then sort of the decline of that market, and what sort of lessons we should really be taking on if we wanted to build a power sector that is based on renewable energy, which is essentially what my presentation is going to look at. So if I start, the power and electricity sector at a glance, so over the last 10 years, the power sector has enjoyed tremendous growth under the auspice of this current government. We have now roughly 92% of our population that have access to electricity. This is a tremendous growth, and we're really going towards the 100% electricity access by 2030, which is promised under the Sustainable Development Goals. Government of Bangladesh actually intends to achieve the 100% success by 2021. But this has taken some effort from the government. And if you look at back in 2008, the overall installation, the total power installed capacity was something around 4,800 megawatts. And now at the end of July 2020, we're sitting at around 22,000. This is a massive growth. This is a massive sort of development, which is laudable. Historically, if we see, our power sector was dependent on natural gas. But government early on recognized that, okay, we cannot really be totally dependent on natural gas because our reserve for natural gas was depleting. So in an effort to diversify, government was also looking at other alternatives. So along came heavy fuel oil, high-speed diesels, and also renewable energy. So right now what we see, 48% of our power comes from natural gas or liquefied natural gas or LNGs. 31% comes from fuel oil or diesel, and a very small portion of it, around 3%, comes from renewable energy. With this heavy dependence on natural gas and fossil fuel-based energy sources, we entered into the COVID-19 pandemic. But before that, government recognizing that, okay, our economy is growing, and we are going to essentially, the development plan, overall development plan of the government is to make Bangladesh a high-income country by the end of 2041. So sort of that sort of political ambition, we entered we had prepared a power systems master plan in 2060, which projected that to be at par with the projection of the economic growth, we need to have a power system, we need to grow our power sector immensely. And so the total installed capacity by the end of 2041 should be something around 60,000 megawatts. That's what was the projection under the power systems master plan. And it had said that the primary source of such energy, 30%, 35% would be coming from coal, 35% from gas, and another 30% from other sources, including oil and renewable energy. However, experts, energy expert, had indicated that, okay, there's huge amount of overcapacity in that projection of 60,000 megawatts. And the International Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis had actually modeled that, okay, there'll be 58% excess in demand. So with this sort of statistics in mind, along came COVID. And what we can see is that COVID really exposed the overcapacity issue. So what we have seen over the past 4 years, so between 2017 and 2019, every year, the demand or use generation has grown roughly around 20% or so year-wise. But what we see between 2019 and 2020, if you look at the average generation in June, between the 2 years, there's actually a decline in generation, which is actually the impact of COVID-19, because the demand has dropped, the industries and shopping malls are all closed. So therefore, there is a drastic demand shortage, or there's drastic fall in demand, which is why there's not much being generated. Accordingly, what's happening, the install capacity, or the capacity that had already been brought online, they're sitting idle, and government is actually paying subsidized amount to those power producers. But what we also see is that this is not new. Bangladesh has already been subsidized. The power sector has been subsidized heavily. And this subsidy is actually going to go further in the event of this pandemic. So IFA actually has modeled that by the end of 2019 and 2020, the government would have provided over 90,000 million taka in subsidy. This is a huge loss for the power sector. And the COVID, has been a massive blow to this overcapacity. And nowhere we were prepared for any kind of pandemic like this, but if you see the country, the way our country is geographically located, we're one of the most climate vulnerable countries. And we should be prepared for disasters, not just the pandemic, but other sorts of disasters. And therefore, COVID is just a lesson for us that, okay, going forward, we need to be prepared for situations like this. And what we see is that the power systems master plan had so much overcapacity, and the coal we had opted for coal primarily because of the reason that coal was cheaper. That was the sole reason that government put forward, that okay, we cannot afford LNG-based power sector or oil-based power sector because they are too expensive. But coal provides us the cheaper option. But now, under the COVID influences, what has happened, the prices of oil has come down, prices of LNG has come down, and government is now forced to sort of think about ditching at least 90% of the planned coal-fired power plant. So right now, under the pipeline, we have about 29 coal-fired power plants. And what we hear is that government is now considering, apart from 3 which are already under construction, they're reviewing another 26 which were on the pipeline. So potentially some of these might be abandoned. So what we see, the lesson from the COVID, it has exposed several loopholes on the Bangladesh's power sector, and government really needs to look at its master plan, that okay, how we can probably make them more resilient to disasters like this. And we should not really ignore the fact that there's temporary reductions in oil and LNG prices. That should not get them excited to go for those options, because this doesn't necessarily mask the dangers of the volatility associated with fossil fuel-based energy sources. And we cannot, plan a 40-year power systems based on fossil fuel, which is very volatile, or the market, which is very volatile. So therefore, this pandemic is actually a lesson for us. Gives us this opportunity to learn from the mistakes from our past and invest more, provides sort of a more what's the word that I'm looking for? It provides us the opportunity to to invest in green recovery and potentially move towards a low carbon based economy. And therefore, when we say that, okay, we need to invest in green recovery or low carbon economy, that takes a massive amount of investment. It needs capacity building, and it also needs to learn our lessons. How do we respond to these kind of projects? So potentially this also gives us the opportunity to learn from our previous and ongoing renewable energy programs and projects. And that's where today's lecture comes into play, where we try to look at one of the most successful renewable energy programs in the world, which is ITCO's Solar Home Systems Program. What can we learn from its successes as well as challenges and failures? and how can we build on that going forward. But as we do so, first, let me give you a very brief glance of the renewable energy sector. So back in 1995, government recognized that, okay, we need to diversify the different energy sources, and renewable energy came in as an option. And in 2008, Bangladesh government formed a policy, which is called the Renewable Energy Policy, is that by 2020, 10% of our renewable energy, 10% of all our power sources should be coming from renewable energy. But we are nowhere near that, as I've seen in the previous slide, is that right now we are sitting at around 3% of our power is coming from renewable energy sources. So certainly we're going to miss that target, but we need to prepare now that, okay, as the rest of the world is moving forward with this renewable energy or green sort of economy, we need to be sort of jumping onto that bandwagon now, because if we miss that train, we'll have to invest heavily afterwards to just catch up. If we look at our renewable energy systems right now, the total installed capacity is roughly around 640 megawatts. Bulk of it is coming from solar power. We have this Konofuli hydropower plant, which is providing around 35%. And very small fraction comes from wind and biomass. So going forward, most of our plan is also based on the solar, but that's also a challenge considering the fact that we're a land-constrained country with heavy population density. Of the solar system, the 64%, there are several utility scale or large power plants that have come online. But a major contributor to this installed capacity of renewable energy comes from the solar home systems, or the ITCOL solar home system. With about 5 million units installed in Bangladesh of the solar home system, Bangladesh actually, back in 2019, it used to be the largest off-grid solar home systems market in the world. Off-grid means that it's not connected to the natural grid system or the national grid system. So basically, this would be a house on top of which a small solar cell will be installed, and it will be generating a small amount of electricity, something around 100 kilowatt or 100 watt or so. So 100 kilowatt or so, so to generate or meet the demands of that particular home system. If we look at the trends, so the ITCOL solar home project started around 2003, and up until 2003, it saw enormous, a tremendous growth. It was actually one of the most successful projects ever. But since 2014, we've started seeing a decline, and at the end of 2018 or 2019, it's sort of reached the bottom. So the monthly selling was less than 10 units per month. So throughout this presentation, we are going to look at what were the reasons for this growth and what was the reasons for the decline, and how can we learn from that. Now, if I wanted to tell you in one message that, okay, why we see this drastic decrease in the growth of solar off-grid solar home system, this would be this: that we are heavily increasing, or the Bangladesh Rural Electrification Board has given massively increased the national grid connections. So Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has taken this initiative that, okay, by the year 2021, each and every household should have electricity connection, or should have electricity, which is in line with the SDG targets. But the government has also taken this step that, okay, this should be achieved through expansion or expanding the national grid. And that means that, I mean, what has that translated between July 15 and December 16? In that 18 months, the government has given over 5.6 million new connections. So this massive growth, or rapid growth of the national grid system has actually halted the growth of solar home systems. The clients, or those rural households, now demand more for or think about getting rural electricity, and they're not so much interested in off-grid solar hosting. So that's it in a nutshell. That's the main reason, but there are some other really important contributing factors which we're going to look at shortly. So let's talk about how this market developed and what were the factors and what are some of the accolades this particular project has achieved over the years. So this started off with this World Bank and other donor-funded project called the Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Development Project Phase 1, which was intended basically to enhance electricity access and also to, in the process, raise social development. The Infrastructure Development Company Limited, or ITCO, which is a government-owned non-banking financing company that finances infrastructure projects as well as energy projects in Bangladesh. And they were given the go-ahead to run this particular project. ITCO essentially started distributing solar home systems through its partner organization. Essentially, there are two things ITCO take into consideration. One is that Bangladesh had a very vibrant NGO sector. There was a really trusted relationship between the NGOs at the rural level, at the local level, as well as the NGOs knew the sort of the local market or the local dynamics. Plus also there was this microfinancing, this culture of microfinance that has revolutionized in the rural Bangladesh. So the NGOs were also familiar with that kind of operation. So ITCO took advantage of both the NGOs as well as the microfinancing environment that was lying. And the target for the project was around selling 50,000 units in the next 5 years, between 2003 and 2008. One of the interesting aspects of this particular project was the financing model that ITCO used. Dr. Manzoor, please tell me when I'm running out of time. So the financing model was considered as a very innovative one. What happened is the donors, which included Bangladesh government as well as the development partners who provided grants and loans to ITCO, ITCO then chose partner organizations to which it provided grants and loans. And ITCO also selected equipment suppliers and improved the quality of the products. These equipment suppliers then provided or sold the solar home systems component to partner organizations, which would be NGOs as well as entrepreneurs at the local level. These people would then go and install solar home systems at households at the local level. And those households would then buy these solar home systems, pay the down payment and also pay monthly payments to the partner organization. With those down payments as well as monthly installments, the partner organizations then would pay back the equipment supplier and repay their loans to ITCO. This was the modality of expanding the solar home system. This really worked magic because the rural households didn't have to pay much. They could pay essentially a very little amount and get electricity in their houses. And that also meant that their children could study at night, women could go out, they could work at night, plus also people could charge their cell phones. They didn't have to go far and go to the local markets to charge their phone, but they could charge their phones within their home system. So this was a massive success. And essentially people embraced the project, they loved the project, and ITCO basically achieved the project targets 3 years ahead of its deadline. So that hardly happens in a country like Bangladesh where projects are completed before the deadline. So this project was a massive success in that regard. And donors were really happy, government was really happy because the access to energy was increasing. So eventually the success of ITCO's program led to other development of the sector. It actually opened the solar home market, and original target was that eventually ITCO will actually help in development of the market and potentially leave the market as a regulator. And at its peak, the market was selling around 80,000 units per month, which is massive. You hardly see this kind of growth. And so this was really enormous and fascinating. And as the market started growing, ITCO saw an opportunity to reduce or phase out the grant. So by the end of 2013, ITCO had reduced the grant as much as by 78%. So the achievements the project has achieved were that through the solar home systems program, the government was able to provide electricity access to roughly about 20 million people, which is 1/3 of the households, the rural households. This is enormous. This is tremendous achievement, and you hardly see these kind of growth anywhere in the world. It has contributed to women empowerment, provided and also contributed to development national policies and planning on renewables, because this is when they started seeing that, okay, we could really invest on renewables to build our power sector on that. And this also had contributed tremendously in reducing the carbon emissions or carbon dioxide emissions. So also contributing to the global carbon dioxide, climate, climate ambitions of decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions. So the ITCO project was one of its kind, the first kind to receive 3.6 million euros funding from Clean Development Mechanism for the emissions it has saved from decreasing use of diesels as well as kerosene. So in summary, all these achievements the project had achieved, this was remarkable. But since 2014, for multiple reasons, we started seeing a decline. The first was back in 2014, the decline started, and also the collection efficiency of installments from customers also started decline. Many households eventually started becoming loan defaulters. And right now, at the end of 2018, the government, ITCO has about 130 million US dollar credit locked or in default, and 35% of this default credit is not recoverable. And as I said, that at the end of 2019 or so, the market was selling less than one solar home systems, which is almost like a collapsing. The government was forced to think that what is happening, why this might be taking place. And if we look at the key contributing factors, so the first is, of course, this rapid expansion, rapid and sort of unplanned expansion of the national grid taken by the Bangladesh Rural Electrification Board. And essentially, the government also had a role to play because it did not see that it would have an impact on the solar home systems program. Plus also the fact that government decided to go ahead with the national grid, as the Vice Chancellor was indicating, that there's still 20 million people in Bangladesh who do not have access to electricity. And many of them live in remote islands, and sometimes reaching them through grid power is more expensive than reaching them with off-grid solutions such as solar power. But the government decided to go ahead with national grid. So that obviously had an impact, because local people, as soon as they got the taste of electricity, they wanted more. And quickly government and others recognized that, okay, what is achievable through these small scale solar home systems are not possible, are only possible with national grid. So that had contributed to the decline and to the decrease in demand. Plus also the market was getting to a point of saturation. And so before that, what happened is that as ITCO opened the market, there were also the entrance of unregulated generics mostly from China, or basically substandard solar systems from China, which flooded the market. So people were interested, or they got prompted to buy those cheaper ones, which lasted only for a short period of time, as opposed to those quality control products which were provided by the ITCO partners. So essentially, it had two sort of impacts on the market. One is the customers saw that ITCO products were expensive, so they were not going for those. The other is that as they bought those cheaper products, these products would not last as long, or probably started giving more troubles throughout the process. So they're not also able to get the service which was provided by ITCO. But then people started having they started having trust issues with renewables. Then the third is, of course, as this decline in demand started, government saw that, okay, if they wanted to make more business out of it, they started distributing free solar home systems to reach out to some of the ultra poor households through the social safety net funds, so such as Kabika and so Kaje Binimoy Khaddo or Kaje Binimoy Taka. Under these programs, government started distributing solar home systems to ultra poor households. Now, this also had an impact, and I'm going to quickly explain why that is so. But these are the three key contributing factors for that decline in the market. Some of the other factors were the political economy as the village level retail. So essentially, as I mentioned, that low people could buy cheaper products, but also when they saw their neighbors were some poor family were getting these products for free, local people or the people at the village level started thinking that, okay, the ITCOL partner organizations had tricked them. So basically they thought that they were charged for the products which essentially should have been free to begin with. So when the next month or when the partner organization agent came for collection of the installment, they charged him or her that, okay, why they were given products when this should have been free. But this was not the case. And eventually there were cases where these agents were chased off by villages, and ITCOL had no way, or its partner organizations had no way to get the installments of the money back from its clients. So that's where the technology shut-off came in. So at that point, none of the ITCOL partner organizations had the technology to remotely shut off technologies when the clients or the partners had stopped paying off the installments. There's also the demand for decline, or the market was reaching to a saturation. That also is a contributing factor. The other is the lack of policy coherence as well as communication among stakeholder groups. So ITCOL was in charge of distributing solar home systems, where the national grid in the rural areas were being expanded under the Bangladesh Rural Electrification Board. And these two did not communicate with each other. So REB was providing electricity connections to households which had already solar home systems but had not paid off all their installments. And once they got the REB connections, they were not interested in paying off the installments that were still left. They were left with, and ITCOL didn't have a means to collect back these installments from the customers. So these clients had REB and ITCOL talk to each other, this could have been avoided. And they have started doing so since 2018, where BREB is now giving electricity only to those households which do not have ITCOL connections or which had already paid off ITCOL sort of installments. The final is the welfareism versus commercializations. Now, ITCOL is a financing organization. So it will obviously look for investment and in, taking out the money of the market. Whereas if you're trying to achieve some of the development targets or trying to reach out to the ultra-poor households, that's some sort of welfareism which probably would not be understood as well by a financing organization. So this should have also been taken into consideration by the government when they were planning to reach out to some of those ultra-poor households through ITCOL. So all these contributing factors had led to this, essentially the collapse of the market. And going forward, there's much more that we can learn from these experiences. And what, since this decline of the market, ITCOL and government has done, so they have taken efforts to recover the funds from the market. So they have engaged with local government officials and local administrations to sort of reach out to the customer, make them understand that why they should pay back, and essentially start getting the installments taken back from them. There's also an introduction of pay-as-you-go sort of modality of solar home systems. So now the government is actually paying the customer. So there's technology that, okay, as they pay, they can actually buy electricity. And when they don't use that electricity, it can be stored, or they can also sell it off to the national grid or sell it to their neighbors. So these kind of technology is there, and ITCOL has slowly started introducing those technology. And the other is diversification of business opportunities. As the people at the local level have started getting this electricity or the taste of electricity, now they have more demand. They want appliances. So ITCOL and its partner organizations have started recognizing there's this opportunities for growing this market in a different direction or taking this market in a different direction. So, for example, Rohima Pros, which is one of the partner organizations, is now investing in building appliances or low energy or low energy intense appliances. Plus, also, it could recognize that financial model, which essentially led to this growth of this market or this model, is not applicable any longer. So they have also started recognizing that, okay, how they can reinvent another financial model or basically move away from that model, which gave them success initially. So these are the responses government has already started taking in place. So finally, what I wanted to tell is that the lessons we learn from this is that essentially to build a renewable energy market, you need, or a renewable energy sector, you need support from the government. Government needs to be heavily invested on this, and they need to believe in this. And if we look at the trends in the rest of the world, we see that this sector can really deliver and pass. I mean, you can now rely on renewable energy. The technology is there, it's growing, it's becoming more and more competitive. The prices of the renewables is coming down. Our neighboring country, India, is massively investing in renewable energy. So the government should also start thinking along that same line. That old narrative of that, okay, we don't have land and the renewable energy is too expensive is no longer valid. And the donors should also be actually convincing the government to move in that direction. So therefore, support from the government and donors is essential to move in that direction. Well, the renewable energy programs need to be adaptive. They need to be flexible. They need to look at the markets, the trends, what we see, how customers are responding. So the ITCOL model was very, the financing model, it worked, but nobody was looking at that when the model was not working. So there is somebody, an independent oversight body should really look at how the program is progressing, really look at monitor and also evaluate the progress and also how much it is gaining back from the market. So there's necessity for an independent oversight on these programs. Now, the third point, which is around institutional capacity. Now, historically, not just Bangladesh, but globally, our power systems as well as power sector has been dependent on fossil fuel. Now we're talking about moving away from fossil fuel and going towards renewable energy. This means massive overhaul of the existing systems. Our engineers, as well as our experts, they're all trained in sort of traditional models which are based on fossil fuel. We need to move away from that. Our students who are attending, this is an opportunity for yourself to familiarize yourself with renewable energy, because essentially when you come into the job force or the professional sphere, this system that exists now will be totally changed. I mean, we'll have to learn about the renewables, not just the engineers, but also the institutions, government institutions and the other organizations. Their capacity would also have to be built. So therefore, we need to invest right now if we wanted to move towards that direction of low carbon economy. And if we invest now, this will go a long way. And an example of this is that, okay, if you remember back in the 80s, we were supposed to get into this information highway free of cost. We did not do that for several governments. But then late in the 2000s, we had to pay a huge amount of money to get connected to the global information fiber or information fiber optics. So essentially what we see, this is the same trend. If we don't jump onto the train of renewable energy or low carbon economy right now, we'll have to pay heavily down the road. So we need to invest now. We need to build capacity right now. The fourth point is customer relationships. As we move forward, what we see is that there is tremendous opportunity and tremendous benefit to build that relationship with customers. The future world is going to be much more decentralized. It's not going to be the top-down approach that we have seen in the past. More and more customers, as we start seeing the other worlds, are getting into this grid network where they could sell back. and they could generate within their household. So they're becoming decentralized. We start seeing these hubs of electricity production, which are decentralized from the national grids, and these smart grid systems where customers play a major role. And already you can see the role of customers, how important that is in the influence of COVID. All the industries where the government was providing all the subsidies were shut down in the pandemic. The only sector that probably kept this power sector of that demand going is the residential sector. So we need to start creating or caring for our customers. You've already seen that the government actually had done the opposite, or the opposite has happened in Bangladesh. Customers were billed, the amounts which they didn't use for, that's why that you shouldn't, government as well as other stakeholders need to invest in this building relationship with customers, where the customers can trust the operators or providers of electricity. And eventually they are going to becoming the providers of energy as we go for this feed-in tariff model. So this is another lesson that we need to take going forward. Finally, what we need to really look forward to our power sector is that innovation is fundamental. We cannot continue to rely on these fossil fuels-based economy going forward. There's more and more technology coming in. The prices of renewable is already comparable, but this will go further down. And frankly, coal and other forms of fossil fuel will not offer that flexibility that we need going forward in the uncertain world under the climate emergencies or climate change. So therefore, we need to look for these innovative solutions even in the renewable sectors. We need to be looking at bifacial bifacial types of solar systems, which allow sunlight to go in, and where lands, you could install these sort of solar systems and could also still grow crops underneath. So therefore, we need to look at these innovative options and do pilots so that we can bring in these new technologies. Or we are a land of water where floating solar could also be looked at. So there are new innovations coming up, and government really need to invest in building or in these innovative technologies. The universities, government should also provide incentive to universities to look after, to explore these innovative options where locally appropriate solutions can be devised. And that's where our students from the electrical engineering department at Green University could also be an important stakeholders. You could start learning more about these new technologies, new new systems that are coming along. You capacitate yourself, because going forward, the market as well as the future is only about renewables and only about innovations. And if we are not prepared today, this is going to cost us heavily. So we should be preparing ourselves, or preparing our students as well as our government systems now, if we wanted to move towards that low carbon, climate resilient economy going forward. So with that, I'd like to end my lecture here, and I'd really appreciate any questions from all of you. But once again, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Feisal Rahman. Before starting the question answer session, on behalf of our students, I would like